Welcome to the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you level up your instruction in order to craft authentic learning experiences for both you and your students. I'm your host, Lee Tucker, a high school English teacher and ed tech enthusiast, and I want to join you on your journey to becoming the best instructor that you possibly can. So if you're ready, grab your adventuring gear and let's get going. Hey, what's up, 8-Bit crew? Today is Thursday, March the 18th. Happy day after St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Hopefully you didn't party too much last night. But then again, with the way that this school year has gone for all of us, who could really blame you if you did? Hopefully you guys are doing well. It's been a nice March week. Weather is getting really pretty where I am. Hopefully same for you. It's warming up. I am exhausted from daylight savings time though. That has been a killer this week. But hopefully things are going well for you and you are heading into that home stretch with just a couple months left in the semester. Later on in the show, I'm going to talk a little bit about feedback and why it's important, but also some different tools, strategies, and methods you can use to help shorten that feedback gap to ensure that your students are getting the best feedback possible. So stay tuned for that. But first, let's take a look at some news and updates. So the first item up in Google News is the full coverage feature in Google News. So Google back in 2018 first launched full coverage, and now they are expanding it a little bit more. So it's embedded into Google search now. So if you search for information on some kind of relevant news topic, you'll see a carousel of articles at the top of the search results showing some of those news coverage. But you have new things coming from Google where it's detecting long-running news stories that kind of maybe span over days. So they'll take all of the COVID-19 articles and all that, and it organizes it in order to help you find lots of different perspectives on certain news stories, which is just kind of their way, one way that they're working to make sure that we are getting as accurate information as possible on current events. One of the new Google Meet features that I mentioned a few episodes ago is starting to roll out, and that is the ability to set up breakout rooms in Google Meet ahead of meetings using Google Calendar. So you'll be able to go into Google Calendar and create different breakout rooms for Google Meet, and that will be available to some of those upgraded Google ones. So if you are on the Education Fundamentals, if your district is on that, then you probably won't see that feature. Also, Chromebook is celebrating its 10th birthday, and so there are some new features rolling out for Chromebooks that you've probably heard about a lot of them, but there are some more features to help you move easily between devices. So there's going to be a phone hub that shows the Chrome browser tabs that you last opened maybe on your Android phone, and you can kind of pick up right where you left off. There is also some new features like the screen capture feature that is very exciting. The ability to just capture screenshots and all that kind of stuff right there on the Chromebook, and even recording videos. And also a new feature for copy and paste where you can copy multiple texts at one time, and they will be saved to a clipboard. So with the new clipboard, the Chromebook's going to save the last 5 items that you copied, and then you can use the everything button, which is the little magnifying glass button plus V, to use the clipboard, and it'll give you a menu so you can pick which of those 5 you want to paste, or if you want to paste all of them. So that's a really cool feature that can definitely help. If you're copying a bunch of stuff at one time, you can copy multiple things at once and then paste it all into a document pretty easily. Microsoft EDU has got some great math updates coming out, especially in the wake of Pi Day, if any of you celebrated that back on the 14th. So a couple of things that will be coming. One, in Microsoft OneNote, they will have a math assistant now in OneNote, and with the update to Math Assistant, it'll give them a step-by-step guide that can help students learn and practice long addition and subtraction. So if you got young learners who are learning those skills, that is a great thing to help them out. And then Math Solver in Microsoft Edge has a new update that allows you to take a picture of a math problem, whether it's handwritten or printed, and it provides an instant solution with step-by-step instructions to help you learn how to reach that solution on your own. So that's going to be a great way for students to cheat or whatever. But hey, you be the teacher, and if you know that's available, then maybe you give them a little extra difficult, little extra problem solving stuff that is going to require them to do a little bit more thinking if they're going to be able to do something like that. But just know that that's out there. If you are in a Microsoft district, know that is going to be available in Microsoft Edge coming out. Well, that takes care of pretty much all the news and updates that I was able to find, and all the significant ones. So let's take a quick look into the treasure chest before we head on to the boss battle. So the treasure chest today it's a website, but also kind of an add-on that you may have heard about, and that is Unsplash.com. Unsplash is a website that houses a lot of very high resolution, high quality images and photos that are available royalty free. So they are wonderful images that you can use in presentations, that you don't have to be as concerned with some of the copyright. You can just attribute it to the owner of the image and all that. But one of the best things about Unsplash is that it has an add-on for Google Slides. So what you can do is you can add that add-on in Google Slides, and it will give you a little sidebar for Unsplash, and you can search for images and all that. But when you click on an image to add it to a Google Slide, it will actually crop the picture and kind of resize it to fit onto the slide, which I think is a great little time saver and all that. So definitely check that out, unsplash.com and the Unsplash Google Slides add-on. All right, that's it for the intro of the show. So let's go ahead and grab our gear and head into the boss battle. We're going to talk about feedback. So today we're talking about feedback, and no, we're not talking about microphone feedback like you just heard. We're talking about feedback that we give to students during class. And so one of the things that we're going to look at is some tools to help you out with that. But before I get into the tools, I just want to take a minute to look at why feedback is so important. And most of you listening are probably already familiar with this and know this, but it's never a bad idea to kind of look at why we do what we do. So the biggest thing is that we know feedback is important because our students need that guidance. Regardless of how much they might understand information, know facts and information and all that kind of stuff, they still need feedback in order to check and make sure that they are doing well. This is another one of those areas where I feel like something like video games really can help us see how that works. Because if you've played video games, if you're a gamer or watching anybody play any games, video games are constantly giving feedback to players. If you are playing a game like, let's just say Super Mario, and you're running through a level and you die, that's your feedback right there. What you did not work. You need to go back and you need to look at trying to do something different. And so it forces the player to kind of problem solve, especially when you get to the more difficult levels where there's oftentimes places that seem to be impossible to get through or to get by, or bosses that are difficult to beat. You have to rethink your strategy. You have to rethink sometimes your skill sets, or depending on the game, the tools or weapons that you're using. And so that's the idea with feedback for students, is we have to help them see what is not working and get them to go back and rethink what they're doing, getting them to engage with the content that they're creating, with the problems that they're solving, rather than just to use a testing metaphor, click an answer and move on without worrying about where it is. We want them thinking through what they're doing. And so providing feedback is really crucial, because if they don't get that correction, then negative skills are going to get reinforced, and they're going to get used to doing things the wrong way. And the more that kind of stuff gets solidified in their head, the more difficult it is to fix those problems later on down the road. So I learned the hard way of the importance of feedback early in my career. So for the first several years, my classroom would probably look something like this, where I would take maybe a span of days and I would teach a variety of lessons. To just an example for my English class, maybe we were doing a persuasive essay. So, I would maybe teach a lesson one day on introductions, and teach a lesson on body paragraphs, and then conclusions, and then maybe a lesson on transitions and all that kind of stuff. So I'll do that first, kind of front loading it, and then maybe giving them an assignment to do. So, maybe after the introductory paragraph lesson, I would have them write a short introductory paragraph or something to that effect. So I would do those lessons, and then I would give them the assignment and give them a few days in class to write it. And then I would take it up. I would grade it. I would write a bunch of comments, give a bunch of feedback, and then I would pass it back. But I got increasingly frustrated, and a lot of you may be in that same boat where it didn't seem like it had any impact. I felt like I spent hours and hours and hours putting all this feedback together, and none of them were really looking at it. And part of it is that I realized, once they get the grade on it, they're not really concerned with it. So they weren't going back and reading my comments, because if the grade was, okay enough for them, they were fine. They didn't need to get better. And so in that regard, feedback was not really working. And the time span is another issue on it. So, they would write an essay, they would turn it in, and, with 140 up to sometimes some years 200 students in class, it would take a long time for me to get through all of that and write good detailed feedback. And so it might be a week or two before they got those back. And by then they've moved on. They're not thinking about what we did 2 weeks ago. And so again, it was not really effective. And so I've read a lot about it, and we would have professional development things about feedback and all that, and that the common thing that you would hear was immediate feedback. You want to give them immediate feedback as much as possible, and that was great. So looked at how do we kind of do that. And honestly, if you want to see feedback at its best, then look to coaches. Coaches are actually really great at providing feedback. And I remember back to when I used to wrestle in high school, my wrestling coach would definitely have that immediate detailed kind of feedback. So he would show us something, and then we would run drills on it, and we would be running them for a good 3, 4, 5 minutes. And while we were doing that, he would watch each person running those drills. And then if he ever saw something that was wrong, he would stop us. He would maybe show us how to do it. Or, let's say I was running a move wrong. He would, tell me to step to the side, and he would step in, and then he would show me what I was doing wrong. Or if it was just something like my body was in the wrong position, or I wasn't shifting my weight a certain way, he would, physically move me to help me get that feeling for how that works. And most coaches are that same way. During practice, they're observing, and then when they see something, they fix it kind of right then and there. And again, it helps to not reinforce some of those negative things. If a player is running a drill wrong and they're doing this for an entire week, then they're really messing themselves up with that muscle memory, because they're practicing it wrong. So they're going to do it wrong in the game, and it's probably going to eventually hurt them and their team. So with that being said, we're going to look at some ways that we could help provide students with feedback that will be very effective and help them to grow in their skills in class. So there are really kind of two key ideas that I look at when I'm looking at effective feedback. And I'm sure there's a lot more out there, but as far as, when I'm doing some of this stuff in class, these are kind of the two ways that I gauge it. One is obviously you got to be clear and specific. If you are not giving them specific feedback, then they're probably going to be confused and not really know what to fix. So the number one key thing is give them clear and specific feedback. And then the second one is the one that I'm trying to kind of focus on today, which is giving them feedback as immediately as you can. So you want to give it as much as possible, as often as possible, as soon as possible. So clearly my old way of doing feedback was not working. Sure, it was clear and it was specific. I was, writing lots of very detailed comments on there, but because it was not immediate, it was not having the same effect. So in recent years, what I've done, I've kind of changed that up. So the way something might look in class now is I would give the assignment first. So maybe I assign the persuasive essay first. And then as they are working on it, I would do lessons for the class if I need to, but I would work on giving more one-on-one feedback to them while they are working. So I'm giving them maybe a little bit more time in class to do the assignment, but then I'm spending that time rather than just kind of letting them work on their own and waiting for students to answer questions. I'm working one-on-one with as many people as possible to give them that feedback right then and right there. And then I will score the assignment. And one of the benefits from the teacher side of that is that you don't have to spend those hours and hours and hours doing the feedback at the end. So I rarely will put feedback comments on a scored assignment. I just, they have the rubric as they're going through, and then I'll give it a score on the rubric. Now, I might have some of them that ask me why they scored a certain part on the rubric, and I would explain that to them, but I don't take a lot of time to go into those details because I'm already giving it to them as we go. And so what we're going to look at today are some different tools and some different strategies to help you be able to give that immediate feedback to students, and also being able to do it effectively, because if they're not taking this stuff in and not taking it into account, then it's kind of falling on deaf ears and it's not doing its job. So I'm going to take a look at some tools and techniques to help close that feedback gap. And these are things that can work for both face-to-face and this year, if you've got virtual students, some of the tools that will help you reach those virtual students, since, obviously I can't sit down and have a conversation with my students in class if they are not actually in class. So we're going to take a look at some of those today. All right, so the first tool is a super old school tool, but it is very effective in helping you give feedback. And that tool is simply your mouth. And what I mean by that is I'm talking about conferencing and conversations that you have with students. So essentially, the idea behind this is to spend as much one-on-one time with them discussing their work as they're doing it, kind of like I mentioned earlier. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to give them the assignment and I'm going to have them work on it. And then while they are working, I'm going to sit down, and it kind of depends on the size of the class and all that. But, I try to give them as much time as possible over, however many days I know that they're going to work on it, and give them specific feedback about what they currently have done. So to go back to my persuasive essay example, I might give them the essay on the first day. And a lot of times I will give them that first day to just get some stuff done. Because, obviously if I give them the assignment and then 2 minutes later I start walking around talking to them about it, they're not going to have a ton done. So I will give them that first day maybe to work on brainstorming and getting outlines put together and all that kind of stuff. And then on day 2, I will start making my way around the room and I will start to just look at whatever they have done. So let's say day 2, I walk to student number 1 and they've got maybe just an outline together. They haven't started drafting yet, but they've got an outline. So again, I will take a look at their outline, at what they have done. I'll give them feedback on it. Maybe they've started writing an intro paragraph. I'll read that intro paragraph and we'll talk about that intro paragraph and look at things to do when they get done with the rough draft to make it even better. Now, I've learned some tips and some, potential pitfalls in all of this as I've gone along. So I did want to share some tips that I've learned over the last few years from my experience in doing that. And one is simply to get them to think about it. So instead of just telling them what's wrong, I might point out a specific place and then ask them to look at it and tell me what they think is wrong. So I might say, okay, here's your intro paragraph. You're introducing your topic here, and then we get down here to the thesis. Now look at your thesis statement, and do you think that this is doing the job of a thesis statement? And so what I'm doing is I'm guiding them, not just saying you've got something wrong in your intro. I'm pointing out maybe a specific area, but then I'm getting them to think and getting them to analyze their own work to see if they can figure out what's wrong with it. And so I don't immediately give them the fix. I try to get them to see it themselves, and I might prod them along with some questions or something like that. If they're going to get the answer from me, I'm going to make them work for it first. I'm not just going to come up and say, hey, you need to fix this, go do it. Have them look at it as a reader, or if you're in other classes, if you're in a math class, you might be looking through problems that they're working on and say, okay, here's this one, you're not there yet, look at the second step that you were working on. Do you see a mistake that you made there? And have them kind of think through that. So that's a really good way to get them to self-analyze and self-correct. And it would help them eventually become more independent revisionists for their own work. The other thing that I've noticed, and it's kind of similar to the problem that I had when they would get their feedback a week or two after they did the assignment, is that I might talk to them about it and then they forget what I tell them to do because they're not in revision mode at that moment. They're in creation mode. So they're working on like, what am I going to write next? Not how can I fix what I've already done? And so one of the things that I try to do is to get them to just jot a list down of the things that we talked about. So maybe just jot down in their notebook, I got to fix my thesis statement, or I need to work on using some better transitions or whatever. In that math class, it might be I've got to go fix step 2 on problem number 5 so that when they get done, they know to go back and look at that again. And then also to kind of piggyback on that is hold them to those revisions. So it doesn't really do any good if I tell a student to rework their thesis statement and then in their final draft, I get the same exact thesis statement. So one of the things that you can do is try to work on ways to hold them accountable for the fixes that you're telling them to do. And it can be a part of their overall score or their grade on it, or, however you work that in your class. One of the things that I've kind of found helpful in my class is getting them to write little reflection posts as they go along. So I might tell them, after we've talked and had our conference, I got them to write down some stuff to do. And then I will have them do a reflection after they have revised their work and say, okay, what did you fix and how did you do it? And, how do you feel about it now afterwards? So that is kind of a part of that overall grade and that overall score that helps them to stay accountable for that. So what about students who are not in class? So let's look at some tools that you can use to help give you some helpful feedback. One is simply just using Google Classroom, Google Docs, Google Slides, and some of the commenting features on there. So a couple of things I use for that. One, I like to use questions in Google Classroom as conversations and discussions. So I can post a question for students to answer. They're going to type their answer in there, but then I will often reply in the private comment section asking follow-up questions. So I do this a lot with reading stuff. I might ask them a question about what they're reading, and then they will put their initial answer. But again, we don't stop there. I don't just give it a grade and return it. It's okay. I might ask a follow-up question that says something like, give me a specific example from the story that shows this. And then I expect them to reply to that, giving me those details. And again, all of that's embedded in kind of the grading of it. So it forces them to actually pay attention to my feedback and to respond to it and add on to it. The other really nice feature in Google Classroom, which is also connected to Docs and Slides, is the comment bank. So if you are in the grading window for Google Classroom, you've got the document open, you've got the window that shows you can select the students and you can select their documents and all that. There's the commenting feature on it now that has a comments bank, so you can save common comments that you find yourself typing over and over again, and in a couple of clicks you can put that in there. Now it's not the fastest, probably not the most user friendly, because essentially what it does is it creates like a clipboard for all of your comments. And so what you would do is you would have to add a new comment on the Google Doc, and then you would click on the comment in the grading window and it makes a copy of it, and then you go in and just Control V to paste that comment in there before you post it. So like I said, it's not like a thing where you can just click on the comment and automatically inserts it into the Google Doc. Maybe that's coming. That might be something that Google does later on, but for right now it takes a few steps. But again, it saves you time from having to type all of that stuff out, especially if it's something that you find yourself typing a lot. Now, the next tool is something I talked about a few episodes ago in the treasure chest, and that is the Moat extension, which I think is just wonderful for feedback. The Moat extension for Chrome allows you to record voice comments for students. And so you click on it, you record the comment. It has the audio recording. It will also transcribe it into other languages, which is good. If you got ELL students, you can have your audio comment and you could transcribe it into their native language if you needed to. It's got a STEM mode that will transcribe formulas, scientific notations, and it works right there in Google Docs, Slides, Sheets, Classroom, all of that. So if you are trying to get through a lot of commenting at one time, so maybe you've got students working virtually on an assignment and you want to be able to get them all these comments on this specific day, you can use that. It saves a whole lot of time. You can do a good feedback session in 30 to 60 seconds for a lot of this stuff to give them some overall feedback to help them out. So definitely check out that Moat extension. That is super helpful for getting through feedback a lot quicker. Another idea that's kind of similar to Moat is to do screencast videos. So if you have a screencast app that you use, I use Screencastify. There's other ones in there like Loom and Screencast-O-Matic. Chromebooks will soon have screencast capabilities on them as well. I've done screencasts to give student feedback to add a little bit of visual, and it's really good for some of those longer assignments. I've done it a few times for essay assignments for my virtual students this year. So what I do is I'll pull up their document and I will click record on that screencast, and then what I'll do is I will talk all the way through the document like I would if they were in person. So I can go through, I can click and highlight stuff as I'm talking about it, and it adds a little bit more of that visual element so that students can see what I'm talking about while they're doing it. And of course, and similar to the Moat thing, it's saved and it's recorded so they can always go back later on and watch it multiple times if they need to. So it helps to give them some more of those specifics, but then adding that visual element that simple audio comments don't have. And then the last thing I'd like to talk about that is maybe we can consider it a tool or whatever, a technique, a strategy. Don't neglect the power of peer feedback in this process as well. So as a teacher, you've only got so much time and so much ability to get to all your students to give them that immediate feedback, but you've got students who can help each other out as well. And I know there's a lot of training that you have to do with peer feedback to help students get the right stuff in there, but it is definitely something that can be useful because what you're doing is at the very least you're getting more eyes on a student's work. So if I have students working on an assignment, I might have them get a couple of people to do a peer review for them, and in addition to me conferencing with them. So they're getting feedback, they're getting information, they're getting suggestions from 2 or 3 different people rather than just the teacher or rather just relying on themselves. Now, I like to use the TAG method. If you're familiar with that, it's an acronym. TAG, T stands for tell something good, A stands for ask thoughtful questions, and then G is give constructive suggestions. And so breaking it up kind of in those 3 categories can help students give some constructive feedback to each other. But then there are also ways of making this more active-based gamification type stuff. If you listen to the episode a couple weeks ago with John Meehan, their new site, him and Michael Matera, the EMC2 learning site, they've got some really great resources for some of this feedback stuff. So they've got what's called the No Red Lights rubric, which is kind of a way of looking at them earning certain things rather than scoring it on a number-based system. It breaks it down into, you have to have this part, you have to have this, you have to have this, and they kind of check off as they have all of those elements. They can do it on their own. They can do it for peer feedback or something like that. They also have personal record rubrics that are useful for helping them keep track of some of those different elements. And then there's a little bit of a gamification thing they have called the badge battle rubric. So students are kind of competing to earn these little badges for the different aspects of the rubric, and those can be helpful ways of doing peer feedback in a single little, maybe a 10-minute time slot in class or something to that effect, to give them a little bit more of that feedback. So that's just my whole spiel about feedback. I think feedback is such a crucial part of the teaching adventure that we have, and I think that is one of the things that I'm always trying to work on getting better at, because I think if we can get better at the feedback side of things, then a lot of that other stuff will start to come around on its own as well. So hopefully this gives you some good ideas and some good tools and some good tips for helping your students out and giving them that immediate, clear, and specific feedback. So go out there, level up those lessons, and help those students out. So that will take care of this week's boss battle. Up next is going to be the 8-Bit Crew Members Board. All right, crew member, it's time to hear from you. So what I would like to know today with this week's question of the week is, how do you utilize feedback in your classroom? So what are some methods that you use? What's kind of maybe the purpose behind it? How do you ensure that you are getting good, accurate feedback to them in a way that is helping them learn and grow? So hit me up with your answers. Send them up on Twitter. Use the hashtag 8bitcrew or tag me at Comic Socks. Well, that will just about do it for this episode. Hey, thanks for listening. I really appreciate those of you who are weekly coming in to just kind of listen and learn. Make sure to subscribe anywhere where you listen to the podcast. I'm on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you can get a podcast. I'm pretty much there. And of course, please make sure to share with someone else who you think might benefit from listening. And also, feel free to share with the community. If you want to come on to the show, I'd love to have you on. If you've got something interesting that you're trying in class, something new that you're doing, something something that you haven't done before that you think other people could benefit from, let me know, and we will set up a time to get you on here. With that said, stay safe out there. I'm proud of what you're doing, the work that you're putting in. Keep getting out there and giving it your best, leveling up your teaching craft. And of course, until next week, may your swords stay sharp and your shields hold strong. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and check out the 8-Bit Instructor YouTube channel for EdTech tips and tutorials, as well as other content on my website, 8bitinstructor.com. And of course, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ComicSocks and use the hashtag 8bitcrew. See you next week.